I think for me too, one of the things that I really want all of the children that come through my service is to be eager for new experiences. And I think if we don't give them opportunities for new experiences or test the limits of their own beliefs about what they can and can't do, I think we are really restricting them. And we do know in life, you know, we have to be able to push ourselves forward and to be able to have a go and try new things. So I think that's why our environment's set up in that way. So there are always challenges and new things to do and to try out and push themselves.
The other thing that you do as well in our space is you actually got different age children mixing, so that multi-age group, that sense of the real world. Older children helping younger children, guiding younger children in risky behaviour, you know, and on climbing equipment, older children helping younger children climb up something or helping them down, and so that they actually got this sense of it's this relationship that's not only with peers but also with younger children, and this enormous care that builds around these kids, are this huge sense of family and belonging to each other, as well as just belonging to not their own family, but they belong to a much broader group of people as well. And I've had recently some children, 22, come back a couple of months ago just for a visit, and they came in and they walked in, they just talked about what they did as little kids and what they were doing and how much fun they had outdoors and what they were able to do and where they were able to hide. And I was thinking, wow, that's sort of what we did back then is still such a big part of who they are now. And we were part of that. We weren't the whole thing around them as growing up, but we were part of an important part in the first 5 years, and that sense of freedom and that sense of this connectedness they have with each other in that space and what they did in those spaces.
The environment supports that.
Yeah, picking up, I guess, on what you just said, Neville, we do have a shared yard, so all of our children can be outside and engaging in that yard, or the older ones can be in the younger one's room, or vice versa, the younger ones can be in the older children's room. And for me personally, I guess, that's probably comes from my own background, or having 4 children in 6 years myself, and seeing how the younger children supported the older children supported the younger children, and the other way round. And I guess for me also it comes from an experience I had working in a service where the toddlers weren't allowed to mix with the older children, and there was a fence dividing the playground. And as an educator, I found that really difficult, because what I found was the toddlers just wanted to stand at the fence and look at the big ones and wish they were in there, and the older ones were often wanting to connect with the younger ones. And for me, that for those siblings to be able to spend time together in a children's service is really, really important. So as an educator, I had to really negotiate to open the gate, and that did take some negotiating, but in the end we got there because I guess of my beliefs and values about what happens when younger children and older children can be together in an environment.
I mean, you both talked a lot already about your outdoor environments. I guess I'm kind of interested in, how do you draw a distinction between the outdoors and the indoors, and what might happen in either of those environments? Or, I mean, do you even draw a distinction?
For us, we do run an indoor-outdoor program. So for most of the day, we do give children a lot of choice about where they'll be in the day. And so I guess for us, our veranda acts as a transition from indoors to outdoors. We do think there are different things that can happen indoors and outdoors, and so our environments are set up quite differently, but with the same ideals about places to be with others, to be alone, to work together, to work cooperatively, or work with an educator. But I guess we value the outdoor space as much as we value the indoor space. We do believe that children learn everywhere, and it is up to us as educators to be the active participant in children's play. So whether we're actually leading that play or whether we're taking our cues from the children, those kind of values are really important to us.
Because I guess sometimes the outdoors does get seen as that space for physical play and letting off steam, rather than actually being seen as a sort of learning environment in its own right, and indoors seems to get the priority as being this is where children learn and it's more educational in some way than the outdoors.
Well, we tend to, I think, in most places, we actually forget that children are often outside more than they're actually inside. But you're right, we actually tend to focus on planning for the indoor space and not planning for the outdoor space. And so it can tend to be, that's what it's like. And the challenge is, well, how do you plan for an outdoor space? And part of the planning is what you provide, is what does it look like and what spaces do you think? And some of that planning takes a long time. Our new playground, we've got two, is, and one's really quite new, one's really only 10 years old really, but the big space, it's taking a long time. It's taken 10 years to get to what it looks like now, with lots of those spaces just really now there. But that was planning and saying, okay, this is what's going to happen in those spaces over that period of time, and that's a long-term vision. But the fact that we've already done, that was the planning. What will happen in those spaces? Then what do we add to those spaces? Under a mulberry tree, because the fact that it's got this big decked area under it, putting books there, and not outdoor books, but actually the real books we use. Because often we tend to have outdoor toys, which are the scrappy toys and the falling apart stuff. But it's actually putting the real stuff in those spaces, and actually there are rules. Children know what the rules are. Our stuff is worked on mats and it has a defined spaces, and kids know what that is. Some of the high scope stuff that you do around labelling where toys belong, so kids know where to put things back. It gives them a sense of being in control, but also when those things are taken outside, that we actually care for them in a particular way.
So in a way, you're teaching children to have a sense of responsibility for their environment rather than just being in an environment that we've created for them.
And there are some things you have to do inside, but there are lots of things you can do in both spaces, and we can run an indoor-outdoor program sometimes, but our space is very big, so it becomes very difficult around staffing. Though in one part of the building we can do that with a smaller playground where children can actually easily flow inside and outside. But often, I think the point is we often forget about how you plan outside. I'd love to be in a space to have an outdoor teacher, and one of the things that we're exploring is how do we create who wants to take on that role of being, or have a shared role of being the outdoor teacher, and being people who are actually in control of that. But also people who of my staff really enjoy the gardening. A couple of us really enjoy, as Judy does, being in the garden and gardening with the children, and just also gardening on our own, because I think it's an incredibly relaxing space to be. And it's, we all need to find that place where we can just sort of zone out sometimes, and zone out gardening with children beside you, working with you, is they get that sense of that as well.
I think you're right though about the planning as well, because I think sometimes we end up with a shared outside space that then means everyone shares the planning, and you might only, your role in planning might be once a term or once every few months that you actually plan for the outside. And I think often if we turned that around and said, oh, you can only plan for your indoor space once every few months, everyone would sort of be up in arms and saying, no, I need to plan for that on a really regular basis. But we don't always think the same way.
And maybe it's planning around the really big stuff, is what do you want to happen out in this space? It's about planning for relationships. So it's about, let's create those spaces, those small rooms. Even if we look at the space and it seems really devoid of lots of stuff, is, well, how can you create rooms? How can you bring things outside or create those small spaces when it looks like all I've got is a big bare patch of ground? So what might I put out there? Maybe it's a tent, or maybe I'm bringing in some sticks and the kids build a cubby, or I hang curtains, or a mosquito net with a couple of cushions, or I just put cushions in the space and with a basket of books, and that defines. Children actually don't often need a wall around them, because something small can actually be, they can create their own barriers. But we need to think about, I think the planning can be not actually this activity-based stuff that we always think about, but these broad ideas about things like staffing. That's part of the planning, is how do you have enough adults in those spaces. The decisions about having an indoor-outdoor program is an issue around, it's a planning and a programming thing around having enough staff to be able to have people inside and people outside, and also planning for that middle space of where kids move into and out of those spaces.
And I guess for me, that because it's so important to us, because it's something we really value, we do plan for those things. And it isn't about planning just for an activity. It is about planning so children get to appreciate nature So it's some big ideas around planning. It is around planning for relationships. It is around planning for children to be curious and to use their imaginations. So it's not day-to-day detailed planning about both our indoor and outdoor spaces. It's about saying, what are the big ideas that we want children to go away with from this place?
And if we look at the EYLF, where it talks about environment, about children having access to a natural world and lots of natural elements, I think it also fits in with actually allowing children to fall in love with the real world. We've got a lot about sustainability and people trying to save the planet, and we're asking this upcoming generation to actually to solve our problems. But I think David Sobel talks about that if we can't actually ask anybody to solve a problem for us unless they fall in love with the world first. And for young children, we want them to fall, I think in both of our spaces, is this falling in love with trees and with grass and with rocks and with gardens and with beautiful things, and the fact that gardens can be really quite beautiful. They can be also quite stark, you know. Rocks and cactus alone can be really quite beautiful, but they can be them as well.